These 2 people are dead as a passenger plane has collided with a ground vehicle at New York's LaGuardia Airport early this morning. We'll have the very latest on that and travel advice.
And a shutdown in the Straits of Hormuz. Iran has threatened to destroy energy sites across the Middle East as the US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Starmer hold a crisis phone call over the Strait of Hormuz.
Just a few hours after the call, no, in fact, it was just a few hours before the call, Donald Trump shared this comedy sketch on social media mocking our Prime Minister.
Hi, Donald. I'm afraid I can't go to war with you. But that doesn't mean we can't still be chumps.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer will be taking this seriously because he's holding an emergency meeting today to discuss the cost of living crisis and how to prevent panic at the petrol pumps.
I am embarking on some of the most significant reforms to migration, both legal and asylum, in a generation.
So Shabana Mahmood plans to boot out thousands of foreign criminals and failed asylum seekers before human rights appeals can stop her. But today, a fresh surge of channel crossings is expected because the weather's better.
And later today, MPs will debate a petition that wants to scrap the clinical trial of puberty blockers on children as young as 11. What do you think of that clip that Donald Trump has shared mocking Starmer? I mean, it's funny, but on the other hand, Donald Trump has just started a war that's going to have massive consequences for the whole world. We're talking about food shortages, oil shortages. I don't find it funny.
No, the fact that our Prime Minister is being lampooned on Saturday Night Live is...
Fine, they can do that, that's their job.
Exactly, but for the President of the United States to share it on his social media site, somebody should just tell him to give it a rest.
I know, it's just so distasteful. It's a bit like some of the things that Pete Hegseth, the Defence Secretary, has been saying, kind of almost mocking the fact that they are killing loads of people and destroying... I mean, maybe the war has to be fought. Maybe in the long run it will be good for the world. That's perfectly possible to stop Iran having so many missiles. But to actually relish it and enjoy it, it's not a good look.
Tell us what you think. As ever, send your views and post your comments by visiting
gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your 60-second news update with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. The top stories at 9:30. 4 ambulances belonging to a Jewish community service have been set on fire in North London in what police are treating as an anti-Semitic hate crime. No injuries have been reported, but explosions were heard as oxygen cylinders ignited. The Prime Minister has this morning called it a deeply shocking attack.
Anti-Semitism has no place in our society, and it's really important that we all stand together at a moment like this.
In other news, the pilot and co-pilot of an Air Canada plane have been killed after it crashed into a fire engine on the runway at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Dozens of passengers were on board. The airport has now been shut as investigators work to establish how the collision happened. Well, the clock is ticking after Donald Trump warned the US could obliterate Iran's power plants if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened within 48 hours. The warning came during a call with Sir Keir Starmer, who will chair an emergency Cobra meeting today on the war's impact on the UK economy. Meanwhile, fighting is intensifying across the region today. The Israeli strikes reported in Tehran and missiles intercepted over Israel, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And here, authorities are braced for a surge in small boat crossings in the Channel as calmer weather sets in. Nearly 600 migrants have already arrived in the UK in just the past 5 days, with more expected in the week ahead. Those are the latest headlines. I'll have a full roundup for you with the news at 10.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, this is quite shocking, isn't it? Police investigating what's clearly an anti-Semitic hate crime after an arson attack on 4 ambulances owned by the Jewish Community Ambulance Service in Golders Green in North London. Well, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has already condemned the attacks as horrific and deeply shocking, and the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, says she's also appalled. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has weighed in. He says the horrible attack on volunteer ambulances is part of a rising tide of hate against Jewish communities in Britain.
Well, let's go to our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who is there at the scene. Mark, good morning. Absolutely shocking news overnight. What more can you tell us about this incident?
Yeah, I mean, an awful attack on what is a charity providing ambulance cover in this local community, not just to members of the Jewish community, but the wider community as well. And 4 of those ambulances have now been destroyed. So a real concern here, because that's going to, of course, have an impact on the NHS, because when these ambulances with highly skilled volunteers are operating, that takes some of the pressure off the NHS, but they're now out of commission, and the local community, understandably, is very concerned. Speaking to a number of people here this morning who said to me that, you know, they were braced for something like this ever since the attack on the Jewish synagogue last year in Manchester. They have seen peaks and troughs in terms of anti-Semitic hatred in this area ever since the October 7th attacks 2.5 years ago, and with the varying degrees of the intensity of the war raging in the Middle East, they've seen a correlation between the rise in anti-Semitic incidents here as well. Now, as far as the Metropolitan Police are concerned, they say they are treating this as an anti-Semitic hate crime. They are investigating this arson attack, which happened around about 1:30 in the morning. They were alerted at 1:45 in the morning. Local residents say they were woken by the sound of explosions, very intense explosions, from the oxygen cylinders that were in the back of these ambulances, igniting and exploding. There was damage to a number of the surrounding buildings with windows blown out. As far as the suspects are concerned, we're told that 3 suspects are still being hunted. No arrests have been made as yet.
OK, that's Mike White, our Home and Security editor, and we'll be back with him later in the programme. We talk now to Lord Polak, who is President, or Honorary President of the Conservative Friends of Israel. Lord Polak, I'm so sorry this terrible thing has happened. Can I ask you, do you feel safe?
No. Simple answer is no. You know, I received this morning a message which I shall just read from a fellow peer, not Jewish, who said this, and I'm reading it. He said, "I'm sorry to read about the terrible arson attacks on the ambulances. Prayers with you." And then he said, very sad, "Hatzola look after not just the Jewish community, but all who are ill in the locality. All free, volunteer Jewish doctors and paramedics. When an elderly friend," he said, "was ill last year, Hatzola came to check on him, entirely voluntarily, as an extra layer of local health care." Hatzola, the word Hatzola, the Hebrew Hatzil, is to save. And that's why this is just so horrific.
We heard Mark White say that he'd been speaking to people in the community, saying that they'd been expecting something like this ever since the synagogue attack in Manchester in the autumn. You came on the programme over the New Year, said exactly the same thing.
That was just after Bondi.
Indeed, in Australia.
Yeah.
This has come to pass.
Look, I spoke in the Lords last week, and when the government were talking about Britain helping Brits abroad, that was to bring people home from the Gulf and people who were to escape what's going on. I stood up and said, what about, literally last week, what about Britain helping British people in Britain? Because the government really, and the Mayor of London is another story, have just not done enough. The idea of any sort of terrorist attack is to cause terror, to make people feel unsafe, and that's exactly where we've got to.
What more, Lord Polak, should the Mayor and the police be doing to protect the Jewish community?
Well, I think we are. Look, I'm not the Mayor or the government, but I'll tell you what we shouldn't be hearing. I don't want to hear shoulder to shoulder. I don't want to hear that we're all sort of crocodile tears. And I think the Prime Minister used no place in our society, anti-Semitism. Well, if he only has to look at what's gone on the streets of London, on the streets of London.
You mean
over
those
the last
Saturday
year.
marches?
Correct. What's the feeling that's being portrayed here?
Yeah.
And that's what's making people feel so unsafe. You know, last week I was in Golders Green, round the corner to where this took place, at the Holocaust Survivors Centre. Mm-hmm. It is what it is, the Holocaust Survivors Centre. And there were 30, 40, 50 people in a room, and I was talking to them. And they wanted to hear from me, but actually I turned it round last Thursday and asked them this question. After everything you've been through, the heroism that you guys, and some of them were, one was 103, one was 102, it was an amazing and humbling to be with them. I asked them this question. I said, are you shocked at what is going on in Britain today? Mm. And if I tell you, it was more than shocked. So we need action, and we don't need support and sort of head on the side saying, oh, we're with you. That means absolutely nothing to the people, the Jewish community. Mm.
But what is that action? Because I was reading a report in the Times a week ago on a poll that's been done. 1 in 5 students in British universities say they'll be reluctant to share a flat with a Jewish person. I mean, this is entrenched.
This was a really important survey report done by the Union of Jewish Students, which was talked of last week and actually was launched in the House of Commons on Thursday, called Time for Change. Mm. And when I spoke up about it, I said how sad it is that the chairman or the president of the Union of Jewish Students has to spend his time, her time, the team's time, on fighting anti-Semitism on campus, this sort of stuff, when in fact they should be just having fun on campus and looking after... that's what's happening. You know, we talk, you've heard of Mark Gardner, the consummate professional looking after the community CST. We shouldn't need a CST. And as David Wolfson quite rightly says, Lord Wolfson said, what is it that the community's got to do? Build up higher walls? Yeah, that's not what we're about.
And I looked at this Community Security Trust annual report last year, the second highest number of anti-Semitic incidents ever.
Yeah.
Is a lot of this because of what happened in Gaza?
Look, you know, everybody conflates and so on. You know, I'm a British Jew. I support Israel. That's fine. People know that. But I'm a British Jew, and my grandkids go to school here in Finchley. We discussed that last time. You know, when the mayor of London, after this sort of event, turns around and says, I think his words, Londoners will never be cowed by this kind of hatred and intimidation. Well, it's too late.
It wasn't an attack on Londoners anyway, it was an attack on Jewish people.
But having said that, as I've always said, Miriam, anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem.
Well,
it's a societal problem.
Indeed. And we've talked about this conflation of people criticising Israeli government policy, which is perfectly legitimate. They're a democracy, we're a democracy. But some people using that as a flagrant excuse to be anti-Semitic. And to what extent do you think the failure to separate the two, particularly by our leaders, has led to these kind of attacks?
Look at the example of the last 2 days where Zoe Strempel, the writer, went to, I think it was an exhibit in Margate. And the pictures that are shown online and we've seen literally would have come out of 1930s Germany. Mm. Yeah. But it's criticising Israel, it's not criticising Jews. What, with swastikas and stuff? Mm. So, you know, we've got to wake up to the fact. Mm-hmm. We've got to wake up to the fact that there is a serious problem, and standing shoulder to shoulder is no good. And I expect that when the Cobra meeting takes place, instead of them just talking about the problems or the issues or the cost of living crisis, I want them to now concentrate on the living crisis of the Jewish community in this country.
And you see, Lupe, I still think it was a shock to me to realise that so many Jewish schools and synagogues now have to pay for their own security protection.
You know, I said it last time. We've done it for years, sadly, and it's and I described you going into a school. I'm hoping to go tomorrow for some grandchildren's preparation for the Seder, the Passover. You've got to go through all sorts of security issues as if you're flying on a plane. That's what Britain has become. Mm. And it's only one community that has that. Yeah. It's not everybody else.
How important do you think education is in this? Of course, it's always tempting to say, oh, we just need more education, that will solve the problem. But You know, a lot of surveys do suggest that young people particularly have very, very limited knowledge of many of the things that have happened in the past, including the Holocaust, what led up to it, how Israel was formed, all those kind of things. Do you think that kind of factual information would actually help in this instance?
Well, it won't not help, because, of course, a lot of it is ignorance, and most people, and the people watching now, you know, why would they know what Hatzola is? You know, I understand that. It does great work, and is an ambulance service which works alongside the National Health Service. Actually, I saw something really positive online just before I came in, which said that the London ambulance service are in discussions. It's apparently in discussions with Hatzola to try and, I don't know whether they're going to brace with some other ambulances. These people do a service. So look. Education, absolutely, of course, but it's not just education. We've got to be much tougher on people.
Lord Stuart Pollack, thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us this morning, and all our thoughts and prayers, of course, with the Jewish community this morning.
And let's hope they do address this at the meeting today with the Prime Minister. Now, still ahead.
Find out how Shabana Mahmood plans to deport thousands of foreign criminals and failed asylum seekers before human rights appeals can stop her.
Yeah, good luck with that, Home Secretary. But up next, we'll have the latest travel advice after 2 people died in New York after a passenger plane collided with a ground vehicle at LaGuardia Airport this morning. This is Britain's Newsroom.
On GB News.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello there. Heavy rain will continue across the Canaries over the next couple of days. Some fine weather across Spain and Portugal. Low pressure still across the Canaries, Madeira as well, seeing the risk of some rain. Sunny spells across Spain and Portugal, feeling pleasant. But low pressure also dominates parts of Italy and Greece. Outbreaks of heavy rain here on the cold side as well for the time of year. The rain across the Canaries will start to ease, particularly towards the end of the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Commons in Tunbridge Wells, a space at the heart of the community, cherished for generations, but now its future is uncertain. Locals assumed the Tunbridge Wells and Rusthall Commons were common land, but for the last 18 years they've belonged to a property company, Target Follow, and now they've put the land up for sale. A proposal linked to part of the site has sparked fierce opposition. Campaigners fear plans for 104 luxury apartments and 285 parking spaces.
This land, which is village green, subject to many protections, what they want to do is deregister it by swapping it with a piece of land over at the end of Rusthall, which to us seems of questionable value and utility. We've already got a lot of these types of blocks. My understanding is they're not all fully occupied. We don't need any more, and we certainly don't need it on a precious resource like the Commons.
The campaign groups say they want to bring the land into public ownership. So far they've gathered over 1,650 pledges, more than £500,000, but they need more by the end of this month.
The support from the people of Tunbridge Wells and Rusthall has been phenomenal. Everybody agrees with what we're doing. They all want us to bring the Commons into public ownership. That if we don't do it now, we'll probably never be able to do it. If this area is developed, then bit by bit there'll be more and more. The 900 or so residences around the Commons could be charged more for access to the Commons.
In a statement, owner Target Follow says the Commons have always been privately owned and have flourished during its ownership. They say there's been lots of interest from potential buyers and bids will be considered this month.
GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 to 10. Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Extraordinary story, but a passenger plane crashed into a fire engine on the runway at New York's LaGuardia Airport.
Well, sadly, the pilot and co-pilot have been killed, with dozens of passengers on board. And the airport has now been shut as investigators are working to establish how the collision has happened.
Let's get later on this with Lisa Minnow, who's the travel editor at The Sun. Lisa, this is a highly unusual incident.
It is, yes. So here we have a fire truck that was responding to a United Airlines plane that had said it had an unusual odour on board. It crossed runway 4 at the same time as a Canada Express plane was coming to its gate, basically. So it was only going at 24 miles an hour, but the collision between the fire truck and the plane has led to, as you say, sadly, deaths and injuries. The passengers on board the plane, 70 of them, are all OK. None of those have been impacted by this. But the airport is going to remain closed until at least 2 p.m. today, and I can see it going far further than that.
So you're saying that the collision, the plane was only travelling at 24 miles an hour when it hit the truck, and yet how has such catastrophic damage been done? Is it just to do with the mass, the weight of the two vehicles?
I think it's exactly that. We're talking about two, very big vehicles. The collision happened, and then what you've seen, these incredible images we're seeing, the plane has tipped up. So the nose of the plane has tipped up, and that's what's showing these, incredible images that we have at the moment. But it is obviously something that is going to need, a large amount of investigation. This is a busy airport in New York. It's the third busiest after Kennedy and Newark. And about 90,000 people will be travelling through that airport every day. So, it is going to cause significant disruption, particularly for domestic flights within the US. This was not a huge hub airport, but for domestic flights, that's going to be a big issue. Over 400 flights would normally be coming out of there every single day.
Actually, when you look at those images of it, Lisa, and just appreciate some people listening on the radio, the plane almost upended. I'm surprised it's only 2 people have been killed.
Yeah, we actually think that it may be more than that. There's been some significant injuries amongst those who were sadly in the fire truck at the time. As I say, the plane originally would have hit the nose of the plane would have hit the fire truck. It's then tipped itself off once all the passengers have deboarded from the plane.
Right. And it's a terrible thing to ask, but the disruption's probably going to last best part of a day, or if not more, Lisa.
I would say so, yes. In terms of international disruption, there is going to be some, of course, anyone who was going through that airport, but it's not a big international hub. That's mainly the likes of Kennedy and Newark are the big international hubs. But it's still going to cause significant disruption because, again, you're going to have 400 planes that are not where they're meant to be right now because of the sudden closure of the airport.
All right.
Lisa Minnow, travel editor at The Sun, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Now, still ahead, if you're worried about your energy bills shooting up due to the Middle East conflict, the Prime Minister is chairing an emergency Cobra meeting today. Apparently they're going to stop people profiteering. How are they going to do that?
Well,
I think they already are, aren't
There's
they?
a lot of speculation about what they will do to help households if this crisis continues. Should they only help the poorest households? Should they support everybody? Government doesn't have any money, that's the problem.
No.
So anyway, we'll be discussing all that and much, much more on Britain's Newsroom. We are Britain's favourite morning show on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. A bit of a north-south split with the weather today. After a chilly start, we'll see cloud and rain pushing in across the north as we move through. Into the afternoon, outbreaks of heavy rain developing. But this morning, some fog and frost. First thing, a chilly start, increasing amounts of cloud across the north of the UK as we move through the day. Outbreaks of rain for Northern Ireland and Scotland. Into the afternoon, the rain turning heavy across northern Scotland. Some snow over the the mountains here. Best of the sunshine holding on across parts of England and Wales, particularly the southeast, where temperatures will reach around 15 or 16 degrees, with light winds feeling fairly pleasant. Outbreaks of rain pushing eastwards across the north of the UK into the evening time. The rain heavy at times, particularly over the high ground, a little bit of mountain snow. The wind's picking up this evening as well. Gales around the coast, quite blustery and a cold feel. Cloudy skies across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England. Some drizzle in the wind, and then largely cloudy skies for Wales too. Some clear spells holding on to end the day across southeast England. Temperatures around 13 or 14 degrees. Through the evening and overnight, further heavy rain moves in across western Scotland. Some of this rain pushing into Northern Ireland and northern England as we move through into the early hours. Generally staying cloudy and dry across the rest of England and Wales, and keeping temperatures up as a result. Southwesterly breeze, minimum temperatures around 7 or 8 degrees. So on Tuesday, a wet start across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England. This rain just slowly pushes a little further southeastwards through the day. Blustery showers following on behind, particularly across Scotland. Gales around the coast. Best of any brightness holding on once again across southeast England. Some sunny spells here, and rain eventually arriving here by the end of the day. Temperatures in the southeast up to around 16 degrees, starting to turn much colder in the north.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for all of you who listen to GB News Radio.
Whether you're at home or on the go, you're making us Britain's news channel and Britain's radio station.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the M18 southbound between Junction 2 and Junction 1, a broken down vehicle has closed one of 3 lanes, with traffic expected to improve between 10 and 10:15 this morning. On the M6 southbound between Junction 11 and Junction 10, another breakdown is blocking one of 3 lanes until around 10:10 this morning. On the A3 northbound between the A3M and the A272 near Petersfield, a road traffic crash has shut one of 2 lanes, easing after 11 this morning. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and Cross Country report major disruption at Glasgow Central, plus delays between Rugby and Milton Keynes. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Everything you need to enjoy a super summer could be on us this year, as you could drive away with this very latest Benivan 4-berth campervan. This campervan is fully equipped with its own kitchen, bathroom, dinette and plenty of storage. We'll also get your summer sorted with a further £25,000 in tax-free cash that you could spend however you like. For another chance to win a campervan and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck!
From cold mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis, in the car,
in the kitchen,
GB News Breakfast is there, with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again
to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Monday the 23rd of March. We're live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
It's clearly an anti-Semitic attack. The police are investigating 4 community Jewish ambulances being set alight in the Golders Green area of North London.
Well, the Metropolitan Police say that they are stepping up patrols in this area. They're urging anyone with any information to come forward. They're currently looking for 3 suspects.
Well, Iran is threatening to destroy energy sites across the Middle East as the US President Donald Trump and Keir Starmer hold a crisis phone call over the Strait of Hormuz.
But just before the call, Donald Trump shared this comedy sketch from American media mocking our Prime Minister.
Hi, Donald. I'm afraid I can't go to war with you. But that doesn't mean we can't still be chums.
Well, as well as appearing in comedy sketches, Sir Keir Starmer today will hold an emergency meeting to discuss how the cost of living crisis is affecting people and how to prevent panic at petrol pumps.
I am embarking on some of the most significant reforms to migration, both legal and asylum, in a generation.
Shabana Mahmood plans to boot out thousands of foreign criminals and failed asylum seekers before human rights appeals can stop her. But today, a fresh surge of channel crossings is underway because the weather's improved.
And sadly, 2 people have died as a passenger plane has collided with a ground vehicle at New York's LaGuardia Airport early this morning.
And later today, MPs will debate a petition to scrap the clinical trial of puberty blockers on children as young as 11.
Lord Polak we had on at the start of the show talking about the fears that Jewish communities face, and he came on this show, didn't he, in January and said it's only a matter of time until something like this happened, and now, of course, it has.
I know, and we had the attack on the synagogue in Manchester last year where people were actually killed. And he said he just doesn't want to hear the Home Secretary, sorry, not the Home Secretary, the Mayor of London and the Metropolitan who's talking about being shoulder to shoulder. Yeah. It's just cliched. They're not doing enough to protect the Jewish community. Every Jewish school and synagogue now has their own security.
And these were ambulances run by volunteers helping the local community, not just the Jewish community, assisting the London Ambulance Service. And it's just shocking. And you cannot argue that there isn't a link between allowing these anti-Israel, pro-Palestine protests to happen on the streets of London, to talk about, globalising the Intifada and all these other anti-Semitic chants, and then people actually acting out anti-Semitic hatred.
But what cretins, but perhaps not just the bigoted, but what cretinous idea to torch 4 ambulances.
Absolutely.
I mean, what were they thinking?
I know, absolutely astonishing. Well, let's hope that the police manage to catch up with them pretty quickly.
There's CCTV, and when they get them, let's hope they can't recommend
let's
what we
hope
might...
they're prosecuted.
Yes, that's exactly what we want.
That's what you were trying to say.
And the key thrown away. As ever, tell us what you think, send your views and post your comments by visiting
gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom at just after 10 o'clock. The top story this hour, Sir Keir Starmer has condemned what he calls a deeply shocking anti-Semitic arson attack in North London. 4 ambulances belonging to a Jewish community service were set on fire in Golders Green in the early hours of this morning. Fire crews say gas cylinders exploded, damaging nearby flats. Police are treating the incident as a hate crime, with CCTV showing 3 suspects approaching one of the vehicles before the blaze began. There are also discussions in just the last few minutes underway with the Met Police about the extent to which counter-terror officers may get involved in the investigation. And we are expecting to hear from the borough commander later this morning with an update. Well, earlier this morning, the Prime Minister said that anti-Semitism has no place in our society.
This is a horrific anti-Semitic attack. And of course, my thoughts, I think all of our thoughts, will be with those in the vicinity, the residents who are understandably very concerned, a Jewish community across the country deeply concerned. I've already been in touch with community leaders this morning and will continue to do so during the day. But anti-Semitism has no place in our society, and it's really important that we all stand together at a moment like this.
In New York, a passenger plane has crashed into a fire engine, killing the pilot and co-pilot. The aircraft was carrying 76 people, with more than 40 taken to hospital. Some remain in a serious condition. The flight had arrived at New York's LaGuardia Airport shortly before that collision took place, emergency services rushing to the scene, and investigators are now examining what went wrong. The airport is now closed, with all flights cancelled until at least 6 o'clock, that is UK time. Fewer than 16 hours remain until Donald Trump's ultimatum to Iran expires, with the US president warning he will hit and obliterate power plants if the Strait of Hormuz isn't fully reopened. Tehran insists the vital shipping lane is still open, but not to what it calls enemy vessels, and has warned it will target oil infrastructure across the region if attacked. Sir Keir Starmer, meanwhile, has been in talks with Donald Trump and will chair a Cobra meeting on the impact of the conflict today, as he's stressing the UK is not currently being targeted itself. The Prime Minister, though, is calling for de-escalation, saying Britain must be protected and protect its own interests without being drawn into a wider war. Well, meanwhile, the wide-scale wave of strikes is continuing, having been launched overnight across the region, with the Middle East conflict intensifying. Israel says it targeted infrastructure in Tehran with missiles and drones intercepted over Israel, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. One person has been injured in Abu Dhabi. US military officials, meanwhile, are warning of further attacks to come, and they're urging civilians in Iran to stay indoors. And here, authorities are bracing for another surge in small boat crossings in the Channel as calmer weather sets in. Nearly 600 migrants arrived in the UK in the past 5 days alone, with many more expected as conditions improve for crossings. It comes as the government is reportedly preparing to hand France a further £500 million to help tackle the crisis, as ministers are pushing for a tougher deal to stop boats leaving the French coast. Talks between the UK and France are entering a critical phase, with the current agreement due to expire next week, and pressure mounting to reduce crossings. Those are the 5 o'clock, 10 o'clock headlines. I'm well ahead of myself, or perhaps behind, I can't tell. Now it's back to Andrew and Miriam.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Welcome back. Well, I think Sam must have got up far too early. He thinks it's tea time already.
I know, in his dreams.
It's not even biscuit time, is it, Andrew?
No, absolutely not.
We're holding on. Well, welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
You've got quite a few people getting in touch, I think, Miriam.
We have one particularly critical of us on the Trump video saying, get over yourselves, Andrew and Miriam. This is win. It brings light relief to the serious situation this country we find ourselves in.
Do you know who the guy standing up next to Starmer is? That's meant to be David Lammy.
It's meant to be David Lammy,
the Deputy Prime Minister.
I don't have any problem with typical shows like that. I think they're brilliant, much-needed live relief. But I just think it degrades the office of President of the United States to share things like that.
He didn't need to, anyway, because it was going to be seen by such a wide audience anyway.
Indeed. And, of course, on the main news this morning, breaking news about those ambulances, Jewish ambulances being set alight in an arson attack. Hazel says those ambulances were used by everyone who needed an ambulance, regardless of their religion. And Kath says, what an excellent guest the Jewish gentleman is, Lord Stuart Pollack, who we had on at 9:30. So nice to see a rational discussion with no raised voices, straightforward facts explained perfectly. A very sad day for this country when hatred rears its ugly head once again.
And as he pointed out, Hatzola, which is the name of the charity, it is rescue or relief.
Yeah.
It's just cretinous that they did it.
I know.
Apart from vile. I still think, Miriam, we should stop using the phrase anti-Semitism, because I think a lot of people don't know what it means.
Maybe that's true.
We should just say what it is. It is Jew-hating. It's hatred
and people making
Jewish people.
Exactly. And people making comparisons between what happened in Germany in the 1930s before the Second World War.
Yeah.
And, of course, that anti-Semitism started off with relatively minor acts, but it becomes more and more acceptable, and that's when people can get away with it. And it's slippery.
I think this attack, like the synagogue, has caused such outrage.
Yeah,
but what happened since the synagogue?
And I think because of the narrative around Israel and the war in Gaza and now the war in the Middle East, it's too easy for people who are genuinely anti-Semitic, rather than just critical of Israel, to conflate the two and say that British Jews deserve somehow to be criticised just because they're Jews when they don't like what the Israeli government's doing, which is obviously, it's not sensible, but people are doing it anyway.
They certainly are. Well, to recap, police are investigating what was clearly an anti-Semitic hate crime after an arson attack on 4 ambulances which are owned by the Jewish Community Ambulance Service in Golders Green in London, which is where a lot of Jewish people live.
Well, the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has condemned the attacks as horrific and deeply shocking, and the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, says she is also appalled.
Our Home Security Editor Mark White is there for us. Mark, these ambulances were very close, I understand, to the local synagogue too.
Yes, absolutely, and of course they are something that is of benefit to this community, the whole community, not just the Jewish community. They are used to supplement the NHS care given by the London ambulance service, and they're very, very valuable and treasured by this local community. But of course, it's the deeper questions around Jewish hatred here. Many people believing that what we saw last night was inevitable in light of the rising tensions because of Middle East wars far away, but get played out, of course, in the streets of London and Manchester all too regularly. We can speak now, actually, to the London mayoral candidate for Reform, Leila Cunningham. Leila, thanks for joining us. What's your reaction to this anti-Semitic arson attack?
Well, I woke up and I was horrified, actually. I mean, this is not the London I grew up in. I mean, imagine being part of a community where the ambulance, something that's meant to save lives, is targeted, and that's what the Jewish community have to face as of this morning, you know. And also, as a mother, I speak to Jewish people Jewish friends of mine who won't let their children go out with a Star of David. And as a mother, I cannot accept a city where you are targeted because of who you are. And it's just not it's a sad day for London today when this is terrorism. You know, it is meant to stoke fear and instill fear in a whole group of community. And I think there has been a failure of leadership in the city.
I think what seems to be more shocking is speaking to a number of members of the community this morning. And yes, they're shocked, but they're just not surprised that this has happened.
No, I don't think they are, and I don't think the city is, because I think what we need is visible policing and visible protection for schools, Jewish schools, public services, synagogues as a baseline. But what I think the Jewish community is seeing is that it tends to come after an attack. But by then, of course, it's too late. And there has to be a zero-tolerance approach for any kind of intimidation or glorification of violence or hate towards the Jewish community, because, you know, London must be safe for everyone. And all streets, all public spaces must be safe for everyone, or else it belongs to extremists. It no longer belongs to us. And if we fail, if there's a community or a group of people that are targeted, such as the Jewish community, and we fail to protect them, then we failed everyone. And I feel that is what's happened today in London. We failed leadership, and the state has failed everyone this morning.
Do you think there's a correlation between what we've seen played out on our streets all too often with these protest marches that profess to be pro-Palestinian marches, but at which we've had lots of anti-Semitic chanting?
Of course, if you have protests that glorify Hamas, you know, a terrorist organization that's sole purpose really is to kill Israelis and to destroy it, yes, you will have this, because, as I said, we need to have a zero-tolerance approach to any kind of chanting, marches, or activities in our public space that glorify violence or intimidation of any community. But right now we're seeing it against our Jewish community. And it's almost a gateway, right? Because it normalizes it, and there has been a failure to stop that. I mean, as I said, it is unacceptable in a city like London in 2026 that my friends will not let their children go out during the day with the Star of David. And that lies directly at the mayor's door. You know, that this is allowed to flourish, and it's unacceptable. I grew up not far from here. This would never happen when I was growing up.
No, we don't know as yet who may be responsible for this. 3 individuals that are being hunted. What is true to say is that, you know, there has been an uptick in activities from groups linked to the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. We've seen recent arrests related to the IRGC as well. Do you think it's now time for the government to prescribe this organisation?
Of course it's time, and the Muslim Brotherhood. But worse, we had an Al-Quds march, a protest on our streets just a few days ago. Oh yes, you know, they said it had to be static, but it still was allowed to go ahead. And it's been going ahead for decades. And Al-Quds is a propaganda machine for the IRGC. And what we're telling the world is IRGC's propaganda is allowed on our streets. We're open for business for the IRGC that screams death to the West, wants to destroy Israel, wants to kill Jews. And I think we've been run by cowards, and it's about time that we stood up for all our communities and stood up for our country. Okay. Unashamedly and without fear.
Okay, Leila Cunningham, thank you very much for joining us. So Leila Cunningham there just wanted to come and obviously show her solidarity and support for the Jewish community here. As I say, many people I've been speaking to this morning say they were not at all surprised, deeply shocked of course, but not at all surprised by what has happened here overnight.
Mark White, thank you for joining us. That's our Home and Security Editor. Do you think the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, will go? He is effectively the Police and Crime Commissioner for London. Perhaps he thinks he might be booed?
Well, that's quite possible, yeah, I hope so. I mean, the big question is, how do you change people's attitudes in a free society where we are free to hold all these different opinions? You can think what you like about Israel and Jewish people, but the question is, what if people are drawn into actually acting violently, which is just completely unacceptable? But how do you change those attitudes? I said earlier on, that survey of university students,
Truly
1 in
shocking.
5 wouldn't be willing to live with a Jewish student.
These are our future leaders. One day they will be running the country, these people, and that's their view.
Yeah.
Horribly anti-Jewish, Jewish hating.
And I think social media means that people only get a very one-sided opinion of what's going on in the Middle East, for example, and lots of younger people get all their news on TikTok, which is an enormous amount of anti-Semitic, even pro-Hamas content on, and then you wonder why they're so prejudiced against Jewish people.
But also the demonisation of the Israeli state too. It's one of the few democracies in the Middle East.
Well, the only one.
It is the only one.
Yeah, and the only one where Arab, Israeli and Christian citizens all have equal rights, all have the vote.
Yeah.
But that's not good enough for some people, is it?
Now, the time is... What is the time? It's 10:17. It's time for the Great British Giveaway, of course, with spring finally on the way. This is your chance to enjoy the countryside in a 4-berth camper van, complete with £25,000. Here's how you do it.
It's a prize package worth over £92,000, and it could be all yours in our very latest Great British Giveaway. There's a totally tax-free £25,000 in cash that you'll be able to spend on anything you like this year. Plus, you'll also get to drive away in a brand new Benevan 122 camper van. Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, this latest 2026 model comes fully loaded with everything you'd expect. You can even drive it on your existing driving licence. Plus, it comfortably sleeps 4 people. Make sure you don't miss out on the biggest prize package of the year so far. For another chance to win a camper van and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. The winner may be contacted live after all entry routes have closed. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, coming up next, the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood says she'll deport thousands of migrants before they can appeal. How's she going to do that?
Yeah, quite. We'll be going through that and more with Matthew Torbett and Piers Pottinger. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The thought of war in space now, so forget the Middle East, forget anywhere else, we're going to space for war apparently. The thought of that could only concern the imagination recently of even film directors like George Lucas and Ridley Scott. But get this, a British billionaire, Richard Branson, has recently warned that war could actually be coming to a galaxy not too far away. Speaking at the Spacecom Expo conference, Branson has given an eerie warning that Britain must prepare for war in space and emphasised the need to dominate the industry for the sake of national security. Branson said that we could, quote, hopefully work with the Americans, but be ready to stand on our own 2 feet. With war very much raging on Earth, is speculation about a potential war in space just a sign of an overactive imagination, or is it possibly a reality? Well, with me now is my favourite space enthusiast expert, Andy Lound. Andy, good to see you. We've still got wars going on Earth. Why do we need to go to space and start scrapping it out?
Good morning. There's always been an issue of warfare in space since the first days. I mean, if we want to take it simply as spy satellites, that's a way of actually looking down on the Earth, part of the open sky program which Eisenhower wanted, which is why he was keen for the Russians to get the first satellite up, because then he could declare open skies to spy on each other. And in fact, the idea of using weapons in space is by no means a new idea. If we go back to 1975, Almaz 3, a Salyut space station, the Soviets, as they were at the time, actually had a cannon mounted on the space station in order to test the use of a cannon in space, which they might be able to use, therefore, to take out satellites and other spacecraft. It was tested when the crew came back, for obvious reasons, because it could be dangerous with the recoil. But they did actually test a weapon out in space.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
GB Loyalty Points is here. They're our way of saying thank you for spending time with GB News. Through commenting on your say, voting in You Decide polls and shaping the debate, you can earn GB Loyalty Points. Unlock rewards, reach milestones and climb leaderboards. Don't just watch our programmes, come and be part of them. Get started by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/loyalty points.
It's 23 minutes past 10. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Our panel is here, Matthew Talbot and Piers Possinger. Are we going straight to the Health Secretary now? No, he's not there yet. But, Piers, this shocking incident in Golders Green, absolutely appalling.
Appalling, absolutely dreadful. Clearly well thought out, planned, and a deliberate attack on the Jewish community. Utterly unforgivable. The question is now, we've got this Cobra meeting this afternoon. With all that is going on in the world, will they actually focus on the defence of this country properly? And at a time when we are in a very serious situation with Iran, is it not time they proscribed the Iranian National Republican Guard as a terrorist organisation, which they clearly are and should have been proscribed some time ago? Cobra meetings are normally about defence or critical situations, not about the cost of living. And I'm afraid It smells to me that Keir Starmer is using this as a kind of cloak to cover and avoid, as usual, making any real decisions, showing any real leadership. And it's also only a month away from the local elections where he knows he's going to get wiped out. And of course, he's desperately trying to cling to anything he can. So pretending to focus on the cost of living crisis and calling it a crisis when it isn't quite yet, by the way, is absurd when he should be looking at the defence of the realm, the fact our armed forces have no money to do anything. We're still waiting for our one ship to get to protect our base. It's presumably they're stopped off for a break somewhere in Malta and having a bit of a sunning on the beach.
Well, they were resting in Gibraltar.
It's nonsense, the whole thing. And this Cobra meeting is a sham, I believe, and it shows yet again the utter incompetence of this spineless leader.
But, Matthew, these are not trivial issues. Many commentators are predicting a calamity worse than the 1973 oil crisis. What happens if we run out of oil? What happens if we run out of fertiliser? You're talking about food shortages. You know, there are clear domestic reasons why the Prime Minister should be panicking, frankly.
Yes, and I think because of the President of the United States being quite unpredictable, and there's a deadline today, which I'm sure will pass. We don't.
It's a very modest way to describe the President. Quite unpredictable.
Well, but I don't think it's unfair to say. And I think because there's clearly differing objectives, we don't really know what the American objectives are. Netanyahu is clearly more on a regime change, kind of let's take out anybody that could be the Ayatollah. So it's something to be thinking about. I don't think we'll run out, but certainly over the next couple of weeks we'll see prices rise for fresh fruit and veg because a third of the world's fertiliser comes from that area. Oil is obviously going to impact us, even if we only get 5 or 10% from the Strait of Hormuz in that area. It's going to have that knock-on effect globally. And listen, I was told on yesterday that there's conversations in government, despite the idea that it's not going to happen, that we're going to have to look at plans about rationing and the idea of who's allowed to get fuel, who you know, whether there'll be queues at the forecourts, whether we're going to have jerry cans being filled up, is it just going to be delivery drivers and emergency vehicles and whatever else? So it's something to be thinking about, particularly when there's murmurs coming out of the American administration that this could go on to at least September. At least September.
Isn't it a pity that the lunatic Ed Miliband has stopped us producing our own oil and gas in the North Sea?
I just don't understand
it just
why they
shows you what we haven't had a word from him. And incidentally, over this terrible attack on the ambulances, we have heard nothing from the Mayor of London, who's also the Joint Commissioner for the Metropolitan Police. And on both counts, with an attack like this, he should have immediately come out and spoken up against it. We've heard nothing from Sadiq Khan. It's typical of the man who is perhaps the biggest disgrace of any mayor anywhere in the world.
Well, he's not here to defend himself. Let's see if he does.
Thank goodness he isn't, because he'd be getting a good taste.
He's very welcome on this programme anytime he likes.
Matthew, isn't it interesting how all of these issues are interconnected? We've got this conflict in the Middle East, but because of mass migration, because we've got a significant Muslim population in this country and a smaller Jewish population in this country now, the war is playing out on the streets of the UK, and then we're all connected by the global oil market, global food market. This really is an example of globalisation, isn't it?
I'd say it's an example of incompetence. It's an example of going into things that you're not prepared for, certainly on America's side.
And that's certainly a fair argument. But on the other hand, we discovered yesterday that Iran has missiles capable of reaching far, far further than anybody previously thought. In the long term, could it be a good idea that the Iranian capacity is taken out?
Well, yeah, but we were told they did that last year. So I think
nuclear, but this is the intercontinental ballistic missile.
Yeah, so they've obviously lied and said they can only go 2,000 metres, and in fact they can go more. The Ayatollah used to say that, you know, I think he kept a lid on it. There was a lot. I was actually surprised by the BBC yesterday, who I think were just after a headline. Steve Reid was obviously getting quite annoyed, and I don't always agree with Steve Reid, really, but
that's the housing sector.
The idea that it could reach London, defence experts would say it's not going to happen. We're protected by NATO's defence mechanisms, and by the time they've reached...
Just going to have to interrupt you, because we're going to go and listen to Wes Streeting now, the Health Secretary, who is in Golders Green.
Ambulance service and members from the NHS as well. So if I can start by asking Mr. Streeting, what's your reaction to the attack this morning?
This is a shocking, cowardly and despicable act of evil, an attack on the heart of London's Jewish community and on an attack on an ambulance service whose sole reason for being is to provide health and care and emergency response to the local community. The police are working at pace to catch those responsible. The Prime Minister and the Home Secretary will have more to say about that. But when it comes to our response today to support our friends in the community with the ambulance service, with London Ambulance Service will today be providing additional support to make sure that the charity is supported to respond to anyone in need. So the important message to the local Jewish community, indeed to the Londoners more widely, if you need help from the ambulance service today, seek it. We will be there for you. But the Jewish community should not be left footing the bill for this despicable attack, which is why tomorrow morning, at the latest, we will have 4 ambulances in place to replace those that have been destroyed. And we'll be working to replace those ambulances on a permanent basis, and we will fund the replacement of those ambulances. Those responsible for this attack must know that the Jewish community will not face up to this hatred alone. The whole country will stand with them. And when we think about some of the recent anti-Semitic attacks we've seen in this country, now is a time for all decent-minded people to stand up, to speak up with one voice, that we will stand with the Jewish community here and across the country in confronting this vile anti-Semitism.
Mr. Streeting, Lucy Manning, BBC News, what do you say to the Jewish community who feel that they haven't been protected and these attacks have been ongoing and haven't been stopped?
Look, there is no doubt that what this attack was designed to do is to strike fear into the heart of Jewish people here in Golders Green, but also across the country. And as a Member of Parliament who represents a significant Jewish community further east in London, I know that what's happened here will be felt painfully and acutely by all Jewish people across our country. The aim of these attackers is clear. They want Jewish people in this country to live smaller lives, to live less Jewish lives, to be less visible as Jewish people, to fear going about Jewish life, whether that's attending school with their kids, shul with their families at weekends, or providing the services and support that makes the Jewish community one of the most resilient, strong and proud communities in the country. I know that the Jewish community will not be cowed by this despicable act of evil, but it is the responsibility of the rest of us not to be bystanders. Every decent person in this country needs to stand up and speak up against this vile anti-Semitic hatred. And of course, the best form of solidarity is practical solidarity, which is why today our London Ambulance Service colleagues will be providing support to the team here in Golders Green to make sure that we don't skip a beat when it comes to responding to emergency call-outs. And we will also, by tomorrow morning, be providing 4 replacement ambulances, initially on loan until we can provide permanent replacements. The Jewish community should not be left footing the bill for this appalling attack on a brilliant ambulance service staffed by brilliant, highly trained and committed volunteers, almost all of whom were up in the middle of the night responding not only to this attack but to responding to call-outs even as their own service had been set on fire by these vile attackers. Together we will stand and we will confront and beat anti-Semitism, but this cannot be left to the Jewish community alone. All of us have to respond. And yes, of course, we continue to support our friends at the Community Security Trust to invest more in Jewish security, and the Home Secretary will have more to say about that. But the answer cannot simply be higher walls, thicker doors, more CCTV. We also have to deal with this hatred at its source. We have to confront and beat the evil ideas that are permeating in our society. Anti-Semitism is an old hatred, but it is alive and kicking in our country, and all of us, particularly those who are not Jewish, have to wake up, stand up and work with our Jewish friends and neighbours in confronting and defeating this despicable hatred.
We have the representative
for the
from
government
Hatzola
to do more to
say anything,
curb
Sarah?
these anti-Semitic hate marches?
Well, I've been incredibly clear. I called one of the first MPs to call for a ban on the recent Al-Quds march. Such anti-Semitism on our streets has no place. And as the local MP here, Wes Streeting and I have just come from speaking to the extraordinary volunteers at Hatzola. This is the beating heart of Golders Green, the beating heart of the British Jewish community. We're a stone's throw away from incredible organisations like Jewish Care, where I'll be doing my shopping ahead of Passover, which we're celebrating next week. This is a symbolic act of hatred, and it's why we must do everything in our power, working with government, working with law enforcement agencies to ensure that the evil perpetrators of this incident feel the full force of the law. But as you say, these incidents don't come up in a vacuum. They come up in a culture of hatred which needs to be rooted out at source, and that is the job of government working together with Jewish communities and other communities right across the piece. We have to be vigilant, we have to stand up and speak out against this vile hatred.
Let me just conclude by bringing in our friends from Hatzola, and once again just to say clearly and unequivocally, we stand with you, we support you, we will be there with you, not just in the coming hours, but as you rebuild and come back even stronger in the wake of this hateful attack.
Mr. Bliss, what is your reaction to the attack on the Hatzola ambulances today?
What happened overnight is shocking in the extreme. The emergency services were magnificent and we are deeply grateful. However, our phones haven't stopped, our volunteers are responding to call-outs, and our service continues unbroken. We have no time to grieve. We are grateful to the London Ambulance Service and to St John's Ambulance, who have loaned us vehicles, to the government, who offered to replace the ambulances we have lost, and to the Health Secretary and to our MP for their support. To our community, our schools are open, our shuls are full, our shops, cafes and restaurants busy. Life goes on. Thank you.
Mr. Blitz, how shocking is this attack for Hatzola and for the whole community?
It's obviously shocking. For any normal-minded person would see that attacking an organisation that sole purpose is to save life is nonsensical. But we carry on, as we did during the night, saving lives, and that's exactly what we will continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask the ambulance service, how important is Hatzola to the wider NHS and the job that it does?
Well, as we've heard, Hatzola is a voluntary ambulance service operating in the community across North London with highly trained professional volunteers responding to emergencies 24 hours a day. They're a good partner of ours and we've got a long-standing relationship with them. We respond alongside Hatzola to emergencies, and that's why we're supporting them this morning with loaning 4 additional emergency ambulances so they can continue to provide their important service to the community.
And if you'll forgive us, we've got work to do, so thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Well, we've just heard
That was the Health Secretary Wes Streeting up in Golders Green speaking on behalf of because of the great work that charity's done with 4 ambulances which have been destroyed. Piers Bossinger, he spoke very well, but we had Stuart Pollack in earlier, Lord Pollack from Conservative Friends of Israel. He said we don't want just words, we need something more positive.
Well,
something's got to be done to root out this hatred.
I must say I thought Wes Streeting was very good there.
Yeah.
And no one could disagree with the sentiment. The problem is we know this is going on and we haven't stopped it. And the question is, how do you stop it? And do you need stronger action? I just said earlier in the Cobra meeting, one of the things they could do is prescribe the Iranian Republican Guard.
Well, it's interesting
movement.
you say that, Piers, because the Telegraph is actually reporting that Israel fears that Iran was behind the firebomb attack, that it bears all the hallmarks, in which case it does put a slightly different angle on it, because instead of being homegrown anti-Semitism, this could be a state-sponsored terror attack, which, of course, it's equally dreadful for the Jewish community, but it is a different angle.
Yeah.
It is, and you need to get James Cleverly on this show, because I put in an urgent question in Parliament in 2022 for the MP I was working for, asking for the prescription of the IRGC. David Lammy stood up and asked. There was much pontificating and nothing happened. After that, I saw James Cleverly in the voting lobby get David Lammy and say, you know why we can't do this. Now, whether there's something above my knowledge and other people's knowledge in the background, I don't know. Whether that's changed now, the regime has changed and things are happening again in the Middle East, I don't know. If it is Iran, we have to act. You know, some of us have been consistent on this for a while. If it isn't, and it is some left-wing agent provocateurs, like I will say, as a man of the left, I have huge issues with what's going on in the Middle East, huge issues with what's going on in Palestine. Jewish people are not your enemy. This is leaders making choices that impact us all, and they are the ones you should have truck with. That's the same for both sides. Jewish people aren't your enemy. Muslims aren't your enemy, and all you're doing is playing into the hatred and the division that is no good for any of us in communities up and down this country, regardless of your political cause. Particularly when it's people that are assisting people all across the world.
So when he said this to Lammy, you know why we can't do it. Presumably Lammy does know why they won't do it, because they've had that conversation.
Maybe he knows now because he's in government and
that's why they've not done it.
That was some time ago. Things have changed.
Sure.
We are now effectively at war with Iran. So that alone should have been a reason to prescribe these people immediately. And seeing the videos that are doing the rounds of the attack on the ambulances, these were masked men. They looked paramilitary in the way this whole operation was very quick, very effective, and has achieved its goal of having everyone talk about it and create fear amongst the Jewish community. This, therefore, needs to be, we need some action. And I say this to Sir Keir Starmer, rather than hide behind a collective meeting that's then going to come out on cost of living stuff, on a day like today, show some backbone, if you possibly can, and do something positive to give the Jewish community a feeling that they are not just being listened to, but action is being taken.
And Sarah Sackman, who's the local MP, the local Labour MP and a minister, Matthew, she was saying there that she was one of the first to call for that Quds march to be stopped, but she was also very critical of the marches that take place in central London every Saturday, where the air is thick with vile anti-Jewish chants.
I've got no time for it.
Should it be banned? Should they be banned?
I don't know about banning. The reason being, there's lots of people that will go and protest against the Israeli state, protest against Benjamin Netanyahu, protest against what's going on. That's fine. We live in a free and fair society. What you've got to be stronger with, and whether it be a lack of police or whatever else, if there's people with placards, if there's people saying anti-Semitic racist things, chuck them in the cells. There's no time and no place for this sort of stuff, because if you allow it to fester, it becomes normalised. People, no doubt, in the Jewish community will say it already is normalised. We saw death on the streets in Manchester last year, and it cannot be allowed to go on. My concern with North London, it so reminds me of Manchester before the attack at the arena. There's a hotbed of people clearly infiltrating. We found somebody that was brought up in Parliament in 2023 who was found to be somebody acting on behalf of terrorist groups in the I think it was to do with Gaza or otherwise. These people are embedded in that community.
Well, we know, we've seen just in the last few weeks Iranians arrested and charged with spying in this country. It's no secret what they're getting up to. Well, thanks so much to our panel. We'll see you again in an hour. Just to clarify, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan has condemned the attack on the Jewish ambulances. He said it's a cowardly attack on the Jewish community. I'm in close contact with the police who are stepping up patrols in the area, and I urge anyone with information to come forward.
He should go up there and talk to the community. That's the mistake.
I
think he should. I think he should be there already. Now, moving on. The DVSA confirms new driving test booking rules will take effect from the 12th of May. What was the DVSA?
The Driving Vehicle Standards Agency. I think only learner drivers will be able to book, change or swap their car driving tests. And from the 9th of June, restrictions will apply when trying to change the location of the exam booking.
This is all being done as a way to make for a much fairer booking system.
Well, joining us now, the Chief Executive of the Driving Instructors Association, Carly Brookfield. Carly, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Now, I know there are various issues around driving tests, not least the huge waiting times, but tell us a little bit about this change that's coming in about who can and can't book driving tests.
OK, so the changes that they're proposing now and they're hoping to put through in the next few weeks will effectively block driving instructors and any other third party than the pupil themselves from booking a test. And on the face of it, and with all the good PR that DVSA have put out there, this looks like a good solution. But the reality is the driving instructor community is not in favour of this move of blocking them from the system, where previously they've been able to support pupils and help them be ready for the test slots they're actually booking.
Is focusing on the wrong people here, because I should declare an interest. My eldest son passed his test on Monday, first time. Very proud of him.
Congratulations.
But we've experienced this crazy situation where there was a 6-month wait for a test. So he booked a test in 6 months' time. Then he had to sign up for, and I had to pay for, a number of apps to try and get cancellations. He got a last-minute cancellation, but then had to pay extra to his driving instructor to use her car because she had to cancel lessons. It seems an utterly chaotic system. Surely it's these apps, these resellers that are the problem rather than the driving instructors.
We launched a survey last Friday, and we've had over 700 responses from driving instructors so far about the changes to remove instructors who should be the professional gatekeeper. They're government licensed professionals from booking tests to help support their students in this trying times. And the majority of them felt that they weren't aware that there was actually a legal move to block instructors in the system. And they also feel very much blamed for the waiting times and issues themselves. And the reality is that DVSA has been able to furnish us with any solid evidence of a tangible number of actual driving instructors who are part of these bad actor third parties, such as you mentioned, like the apps. So it seems like we're penalising who should be a professional gatekeeper to a driving test and somebody who helps you through your driving test to licensure, in fact, to try and eradicate these people that we don't seem to be able to deal with, which are the third-party bots and other issues. The reality is, however, the booking system, that's a bit of a red herring for the real problem of driving test supply. That's what's really driving the issues of supply at the moment.
And is this still because of the backlog after COVID? I think 1 million tests were cancelled or weren't sat during COVID. Is there a shortage of driving instructors, driving examiners? Where's the blockage here?
It's a real problem with driving examiner recruitment. So the biggest issue since lockdown and the recovery of driving test supply has been about getting the right people to the front line. And DVSA, quite frankly, have struggled to get on top of this issue. They've ran 19 successive examiner recruitment campaigns because they acknowledge they need a lot more examiners deployed across the UK. And they've been unsuccessful in those campaigns to a large degree because whilst they've recruited people, in training, a lot of people have fallen out the process because the training process is too long. It needs to be expedited. There are examiners who are already in place who are leaving because they're unhappy. People get into the job if they survive the training process and they get into the job and they don't like the job and they fall out at that stage as well. So one of the biggest fixes that we've actually suggested could be made is to improve the pay and conditions for examiners to make it more attractive and to aid retention. But that's where the biggest blockage is coming with deployment of examiners to the front line. And examiners, instructors are now being fairly penalised by being thrown out of the ability to support pupils in booking their test, and they're not the bad actors in this process. I can tell you that for sure. The evidence isn't there.
Fascinating.
Carly Brookfield, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I think the really tragic part of this is young people are struggling to get jobs. Lots of jobs require a driving licence, and young people can't
get to take the
pass their
test.
test.
Now up next, Prime Minister's called together his top team to roll out a strategy, he says, to prevent panic buying at the petrol pumps. All about the cost of living. I thought the Cobra was all about national security, but there we are.
Well, if you're worried about jet fuel prices, but are in search of some holiday sun, here's the forecast for some of our top European destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Heavy rain will continue across the Canaries over the next couple of days. Some fine weather across Spain and Portugal. Low pressure still across the Canaries, Madeira as well, seeing the risk of some rain. Sunny spells across Spain and Portugal, feeling pleasant. But low pressure also dominates parts of Italy and Greece. Outbreaks of heavy rain here on the cold side as well for the time of year. The rain across the Canaries will start to ease, particularly towards the end of the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Day.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis, in the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it? We're here again to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong Tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, the domestic pressure is piling on the government because of what's happening in Iran.
Sir Keir Starmer is going to hold an emergency meeting today to discuss the cost of living crisis as oil prices rise and how to prevent panic at the petrol pumps.
GB News political editor Chris Hope is in Downing Street. Chris, it's the Cobra meeting, which we normally associate with security, but this time it's national. It's about the cost of living.
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. And morning, Miriam. Yeah, it's definitely different to have the governor of the Bank of England at a Cobra meeting. That's normally what happens. A Cobra meeting, it's initials for Cabinet Office Briefing Room A, and that's where the government normally controls tackling with international crises. Instead, we've got the governor of the Bank of England in there to discuss how to deal with this fuel crisis, the rising energy bills caused by the crisis in Iran. Now, the PM told us moments ago in a school that Cobra will discuss every lever available for dealing with that cost of living crisis. Here's what he told us.
Well, Cobra is the opportunity at the highest level to bring people together on matters of real significant national importance. Obviously, Cobra is usually used for sort of military considerations, consular considerations, but I think with the Iran war, most people are very concerned now, not only what they're seeing on their screens in relation to the conflict itself, but also that question of how's it going to affect me and my family. And so today we're looking at the economic impact, and I am asking for every lever that's available to the government to deal with the cost of living to be discussed at Cobra. Hence, we've got the Bank of England and others there. But I want to make sure that when it comes to the cost of living, we're doing everything we possibly can at a very difficult period like this.
So the PM is there. He's also got Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. She just drove away in the last quarter of an hour to a meeting. Ed Miliband, the Climate Change Secretary, and Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary. Why is the Bank of England governor there? Well, that means all levers are being looked at. To me, it means they're looking at some major intervention, possibly, which they're worried could spook the bond markets, and that's why he's there. But we'll wait and see. And later, of course, we'll see the PM live on GB News taking questions from MPs on the Liaison Committee.
All right, Chris. That's Chris Hope, who is our political editor in Downing Street.
Still ahead?
Yeah, we'll have the latest from Golders Green on that appalling, wicked arson attack on 4 Jewish ambulances in the early hours of this morning.
You're watching Britain's Newsroom, Britain's favourite morning show on GB News.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. A bit of a north-south split with the weather today. After a chilly start, we'll see cloud and rain pushing in across the north as we move through. Into the afternoon, outbreaks of heavy rain developing. But this morning, some fog and frost. First thing, a chilly start, increasing amounts of cloud across the north of the UK as we move through the day. Outbreaks of rain for Northern Ireland and Scotland. Into the afternoon, the rain turning heavy across northern Scotland. Some snow over the mountains here. Best of the sunshine holding on across parts of England and Wales, particularly the southeast, where temperatures will reach around 15 or 16 degrees, with light winds feeling fairly pleasant. Outbreaks of rain pushing eastwards across the north of the UK into the evening time. The rain heavy at times, particularly over the high ground, a little bit of mountain snow. The wind's picking up this evening as well. Gales around the coast, quite blustery and a cold feel. Cloudy skies across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England. Some drizzle in the wind, and then largely cloudy skies for Wales too. Some clear spells holding on to end the day across southeast England. Temperatures around 13 or 14 degrees. Through the evening and overnight, further heavy rain moves in across western Scotland. Some of this rain pushing into Northern Ireland and northern England as we move through into the early hours. Generally staying cloudy and dry across the rest of England and Wales, and keeping temperatures up as a result. Southwesterly breeze, minimum temperatures around 7 or 8 degrees. So on Tuesday, a wet start across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England. This rain just slowly pushes a little further southeastwards through the day. Blustery showers following on behind, particularly across Scotland. Gales around the coast. Best of any brightness holding on once again across southeast England. Some sunny spells here, and rain eventually arriving here by the end of the day. Temperatures in the southeast up to around 16 degrees, starting to turn much colder in the north.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's a prize package worth over £92,000. There's a totally tax-free £25,000 in cash that you'll be able to spend on anything you like this year. Plus, you'll also get to drive away in a brand new Benevan 122 camper van. Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, this latest 2026 model comes fully loaded with everything you'd expect. For another chance to win a camper van and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray. Are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines. The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB Newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
The Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong Tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 o'clock on Monday, the 23rd of March, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, we'll have the latest on that anti-Semitic arson attack. Any moment now, the police are going to provide a live update after 4 community Jewish ambulances were set on fire in the Golders Green area of London this morning.
मेरा नाम हन्ना स्पेंसर है मैं ग्रीन पार्टी की उम्मीदवार हूं
Well, GB News can exclusively reveal the Conservatives want to ban the use of foreign languages in future election campaigns.
Yes, campaigning in Bengali and Urdu really helped the Greens to take Gorton and Denton in that by-election just a few weeks ago. The Conservatives want to put a stop to it, but what do you think?
And later today, MPs will debate a petition that wants to scrap the clinical trial of puberty blockers on children as young as 11. We'll be joined by the man who started the petition.
And Iran is threatening to destroy energy sites across the Middle East as Donald Trump and Keir Starmer hold a crisis phone call over the siege of the Strait of Hormuz.
And in breaking news today, 2 people have sadly died as a passenger plane has collided with a ground vehicle at New York's LaGuardia Airport early hours of this morning.
It's really important, this petition about puberty blockers, because currently the situation is it's been postponed, the trial, but not scrapped. And this is saying, just let's get rid of it altogether, and quite right.
And people were really shocked when Wes Streeting announced that this would happen because, of course, this was following on from the Cass report a couple of years ago, where she really shone a light on some of the appalling things that have been happening in the health service, in the Tavistock Clinic, young children being given cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers. But it's quite a surprise then, following that this trial was initiated. Anyway, it's been paused, potentially could be stopped by the Health Secretary.
Yeah, and we're going to be speaking to the man behind that petition, so stay tuned for that. Now, we'd love to hear what you think as ever. Send your views, post your comments by visiting
gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. Just gone 11 o'clock. The top story this hour. Sir Keir Starmer has condemned what he calls a deeply shocking anti-Semitic arson attack in the north of London. 4 ambulances belonging to a Jewish community service were set on fire in Golders Green in the early hours. Fire crews say gas cylinders exploded, damaging nearby flats. Police are now treating the incident as a hate crime, with CCTV showing 3 suspects approaching one of the vehicles before the blaze took place. The Prime Minister says anti-Semitism has no place in our society. Let's take a listen now to that clip from Sir Keir Starmer.
This is a horrific anti-Semitic attack. And, of course, My thoughts, I think all of our thoughts, will be with those in the vicinity, the residents who are understandably very concerned, a Jewish community across the country deeply concerned. I've already been in touch with community leaders this morning and will continue to do so during the day. But anti-Semitism has no place in our society, and it's really important that we all stand together at a moment like this.
And do stay with us this morning for that press conference from Emergency Services. We're expecting to hear from the Met Police Detective Chief Superintendent in the next few minutes. In New York, a passenger plane has crashed into a fire engine, killing the pilot and co-pilot. The aircraft was carrying 76 people. More than 40 have been taken to hospital. Some are in a serious condition. The flight had arrived at New York's LaGuardia Airport shortly before the collision, and emergency services rushed to the scene. Investigators are now examining what went wrong. The airport is now closed, with all flights cancelled until at least 6 o'clock UK time. Fewer than 15 hours remain until Donald Trump's ultimatum to Iran expires, with the US president warning he will hit and obliterate power plants if the Strait of Hormuz isn't fully reopened. Tehran insists the vital shipping lane is still open, but not to what it calls enemy vessels, and has warned it will target oil infrastructure across the region if attacked. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has been in talks with Donald Trump and will chair a Cobra meeting on the impact of the conflict later today, as he stresses the UK is not currently being targeted. The Prime Minister, though, is calling for de-escalation, saying Britain must protect its interests without being drawn into a wider war. Well, that comes as a wide-scale wave of strikes has been launched overnight as the conflict in the Middle East is intensifying. Israel says it's targeted infrastructure in Tehran, while missiles and drones have been intercepted over Israel, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. US military officials are also warning of further attacks, and they're urging civilians in Iran to stay indoors. Here, 7 locations have been selected for a new generation of towns as ministers push ahead with plans to boost house building. Each site is expected to deliver at least 10,000 homes, with some set to exceed 40,000, all forming part of the government's wider target to build 1.5 million homes. The developments are designed as full communities with green spaces, transport links and high streets, aiming to reduce reliance on cars and create places people can thrive. Ministers say the move marks a turning point in tackling the housing crisis, with construction expected to transform key areas across the country. And authorities are bracing for another surge in small boat crossings in the Channel this week as calmer weather sets in. Nearly 600 migrants have arrived in the UK in just the past 5 days alone, with many more expected as conditions improve for crossings. The government is now preparing to hand France a further £500 million to help tackle the crisis, as ministers push for a tougher deal to stop boats from leaving the French coast. That comes as talks between the UK and France are entering a critical phase, with the current agreement due to expire next week and pressure mounting to reduce the crossings. Those are the latest headlines. It's not 5 o'clock, it is 11 o'clock, just in case you were wondering.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB Digital Radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Well, I'm glad you've cleared that up, Sam. Hello, welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
So to recap, police are investigating the anti-Semitic hate crime after an arson attack on 4 ambulances belonging to the Jewish Community Ambulance Service in Golders Green in London.
The Prime Minister has condemned the attacks as horrific and deeply shocking, and the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood says she is also appalled.
We've got in the studio with us Matthew Talbot and Piers Pottinger. We talked about this earlier. The police are going to update us, Matthew. But Jewish people, we talked to Lord Polat today, he doesn't feel safe.
Jewish people I speak to don't. I've spoken to TV producers, I've spoken to people that have lived their lives in this country for the last 40, 50 years, were born here. And the one that stuck with me was someone I've known a few years, and I said, how are you doing at the moment? This was last year. And he said, well, it's been hard because it's fine. I've finally come to the realisation that my kids aren't going to grow up in this country.
Oh, isn't that terrible?
And the amount, just anecdotally, of people I know that are Jewish going, well, we're going to go to Israel. Which actually, considering everything, you'd be surprised you feel more safe there than you do here. But it's It's like I said earlier, I think Jewish people probably feel anti-Semitism is normalised, and part of that will be some of the stuff you see on these marches. It's the normalisation of it online. I think with the online stuff, there's a normalisation of racism left, right and centre online. Now, I'm not sure what we do about it long term. You want to look at education, you want to look at schools, you want to look at better role models and all this sort of stuff. But people are clearly feeling very divided and are reaching out to see the wrong people as their enemies, basically. We're all in the same boat, unfortunately.
Piers, The Telegraph are reporting that Israel suspects the IRGC of carrying out this attack. They say it fits their MO. But doesn't this reinforce the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu, as controversial as he is, and Matthew's been talking about how uncomfortable he is with some of the actions of Israel in the Middle East, he was right in the 1990s to say that Iran was the major enemy, and actually, if the world had acted then to stop Iran developing these capabilities, developing these missiles, perhaps we wouldn't be in this crisis now.
And actually, to be fair to the Gulf states, they themselves have been very, very outspoken about Iran for years. Bahrain, particularly, as it's the most vulnerable of the Gulf states, and has been hit during this, as many of them have. They've been proved right as well. The fact is that you don't develop a nuclear plants in the way they have. It wasn't for energy. They don't need energy. It's obviously they were doing it for one reason alone, and that was to create vicious weaponry. And now they're doing what they always knew they could do in the event of a difficult situation, is close the Straits of Hormuz, turn the tap off for the world's oil and gas. And that was their most powerful weapon. This has been coupled with, sadly, Donald Trump going to war without a clear agenda as to what he's trying to achieve. I mean, first of all, it was regime change. Then it was, oh, no, we've got to keep the Straits of Hormuz open. Then it was, we've got to obliterate all there. Now it's just all of the above, maybe a bit, but we don't know quite what. And so it's a mess. And it's a horrible, horrible mess. And the question is, you know, Trump's got himself into a situation now where I don't see he's got a way of winning, not at least with the American people.
And Iran won't care about any economic hardship closing the Strait from his causes to its own people, because they don't
care about their own people. Don't forget, this is the regime that only recently killed 36,000 protesters, ordinary citizens, and the reason that the other ordinary Iranians, decent Iranians, are not protesting is they've all been told by mobile phone and every other device that if they are seen on the streets, they'll take that as a protest and shoot them. So no one, even if they want to protest, is going to be foolish enough to go on the streets. So the regime have been smarter than Trump realised. They haven't collapsed in the way we would have all hoped. And so we've now got this very violent, expensive, horrible mess that is teetering on the edge of world war. And what Cobra should be focusing on is the defence of the realm, how we're going to actually defend ourselves in this situation. That should be the number one item on the agenda, not the cost of petrol at petrol stations.
Bearing in mind, as well, we now know, don't we, Matthew, that Diego Garcia was attacked by Iranian missiles. They didn't make it, but there was a serious attack, and that is a British military base.
It is, and they were very clear, the Iranians, in saying, you know, if you're going to let the Americans use your air bases, you're involved as well now. I think it's good that one failed. It's good that one was intercepted, you know, sort of 900 metres away from Diego Garcia. My hope is for the warheads to be successful anywhere near the UK, they have to have a lighter load at the front, which means they'll be accurate. What they're having to use at the moment to get further is a heavier warhead, and the other one comes out the front of it. You're going to have to fire several of those to get any sort of accuracy to hit a building somewhere like London. Also, you'll have to fire several to even attempt to get past the Balkans, because at that point we'll be aware, NATO will make us aware, and we'll know...
The only problem is to defend our country, to defend against these kind of missiles, we need our Type 45 ships, and none of them are around at the moment.
All in dry dock, aren't they?
We don't have any ground weaponry to defend ourselves against these ballistic missiles. We don't have them. I mean, our defences are appalling at the moment. Never have they been at such a low ebb. And that, despite Starmer's completely empty promises of taking 2% or 3% of GDP, and he tells the world he's going to do this and strengthen our defence, we're not getting a penny.
No. Now,
well, on that
we'll speak to you guys in a little bit, because we're going to have to talk about this major clinical trial into puberty blockers. MPs are going to debate a petition relating to the trial, with people calling for it to be not just postponed, cancelled.
Well, psychotherapist and founder of Just Therapy, James Esses, joins us now. James, good morning. Thank you for joining Britain's Newsroom. Now, you've long campaigned against this trial. You're saying that it's not safe, that the risks are too great for children. Were you pleased that the government paused the trial last month?
Well, good morning. I was, but the way they've gone about it is slightly odd, and they highlighted newfound safety and harm concerns regarding the trial. Now, these are long-standing concerns that clinicians from all across the world have been speaking about for many, many years. So it's slightly odd that just on the precipice of starting the trial, they come up with these concerns. But nonetheless, a pause is a pause. My concern is that they now try and fiddle around with this, come back with a kind of new, shiny, repackaged trial and still crack on with this. And as far as I and others are concerned, there is absolutely no way that this trial can be conducted ethically at all.
Tell us why, James, you are so concerned by it, the idea of it.
Well, we already know the significant harms that puberty blockers cause in terms of bone growth, brain development, sexual functioning, and it puts children on a slippery slope towards infertility. And we only have to listen to the horror stories of the multiple detransitioners vocal in the UK alone who have suffered irreversible harm at the back of these puberty blockers. Puberty can be confusing, it can be unsettling, but it should not be something that needs curing or fixing. It is a completely natural part of human progression. I see children week in, week out in my psychotherapy practice, and the answer is not to suggest to them that there is something wrong with them that needs fixing, and that's exactly what this trial does suggest.
Of course, this trial was recommended in the Cass report. Hilary Cass pointed out that there was not enough data surrounding the treatment of children with gender dysphoria. Do you think that people with gender-critical beliefs, let's call it, were too quick to welcome the Cass report in a carte blanche kind of way, and now actually they're asking questions about whether or not this recommendation was suitable?
Well, look, I myself may be slightly guilty of that. I mean, at the time, it was such a momentous occasion. It led to the closure of the disgraceful Tavistock Clinic, and it did shine a spotlight on the atrocities that have been taking place across the country. So I think we were just pleased to see the dial shifting on this. But no, in truth, yes, Cass did propose this trial. I'd kind of hoped that it would never be brought forward. And I have become increasingly concerned by some of the, I'm going to call it rhetoric, actually, that's been put out by Cass herself recently on this. I mean, she's acknowledged that there is zero evidence that puberty blockers actually work, but she said, well, we should have the trial anyway because people believe that they do. Now, belief should play no part in clinical trials. That is the antithesis of medical ethics. There are people out there who believe that baking soda cures cancer, and I'm still waiting for the government to start a baking soda trial.
Yeah. What of the parents, James, who are willing to allow an 11-year-old or 12-year-old child to be put through this ordeal?
Well, look, there are a lot of parents who are more than happy to push their children down these paths for reasons unbeknownst to me, but a lot of them have been caught up in the madness of all of this. They've had many years of being told by activists, but also by clinicians, that if they don't allow their children to medically transition, that their children may end up killing themselves. And that weighs very heavily on parents' minds. But I don't see how anyone, the parents or the children, can actually give informed consent for this trial, what it entails, and the serious harms that can come about off the back of of it. So, as I said, as far as I'm concerned, there is no ethical basis for this. Myself and others have given Wes Streeting, the government, ample opportunity to pull the plug on this. I mean, alongside this petition, I and a few others are also bringing a judicial review against the government to try and halt this. So we're trying to use any means available to us. And yet Wes Streeting seems happy to just crack on with this business as usual, and he undermines child safeguarding as a result.
Now, James, you've started this petition, but you've got a lot of backers, actually cross-party. Are you heartened by the unity that's being shown in this issue? Do you think that actually we are moving to a more sensible position broadly, despite the existence of this trial?
I do think so. It's been very heartwarming to see the number of MPs from across the political spectrum speak out on this. I'm looking forward very much to attending the debate in Parliament later on today and to see the impassioned speeches being made. So the dial is definitely shifting. But unfortunately, in terms of the establishment and the position that they take and from the upper echelons of Labour, as I said, they still seem happy to kind of crack on with this. Starmer, Streeting, they seem to want to back both horses because they know this is quite politically contentious. But as I said, they should be acting with a sense of backbone here, because there is nothing more important in a society than to protect its children. And they are failing our children as long as they proceed with this trial.
And you used a very loaded word earlier in the interview, James. You talked about atrocities. You think that's what's been happening to children? It's atrocities, is the word you used.
I genuinely think this is one of the most atrocious things in the modern era. I equate this to state-sanctioned child abuse, because the state knows the harms that have been caused and yet they still press on. Why? Because they want to pander to a noisy activist movement. I think it's a shameful time in British history. The rest of the world is looking on and will be guided by what we do here. So we've got a lot of power and responsibility to do things right. But I sincerely hope that when the dust settles on this and that we eradicate this ideology from our society, that those who are responsible for mutilating children are held to account.
James Essex, thank you so much for joining us, and we will be covering the story again tomorrow after that debate in Parliament. So let's see what MPs have to say.
Now, some breaking news. Donald Trump has said that the US has had good and productive conversations with Iran, and he will order the military to postpone any military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure. So he blinked first.
Indeed. I mean, it is extraordinary, the posts that come out of Donald Trump's Truth Social.
Well, let's get it. We've still got our panel here.
Key part of the information campaign, I think, in this war is Trump's social media.
Well, extraordinary. Piers Pottinger, what do you make of that? Till midnight, and he was going to blow the hell out of...
Yeah, well, I mean, it's come to the end, I think, of his 48-hour deadline.
Yeah.
And so there are no winners in this. He said he's stopping it. Well, let's see if he has, in which case, what a mess he's created. All for nothing. I think there's no way he can make himself look like a winner in this situation. And I'm not sure what will happen as a result of this, because so much that is in place and about to happen now seems pointless. And also it seems a terrible thing to say that the Iranian regime have proved too strong for Donald Trump.
And what about Israel, Matthew? I mean, Israel would presumably carry on anyway. I mean, he's not calling off the war. He's just saying that the promised strike against Iran's energy plants is off.
Listen, Israel are into southern Lebanon. 800,000 people have had to go. They've been told not to come back by Israel. They're beginning their little expansionist war. To borrow a Donald Trump phrase, he doesn't hold the cards. That's why he's had to row back. There is no way he could do this without committing ground troops. That would be catastrophic, not only for human life, but for his midterms in November. Again, to echo Piers, what was all that for? And again, I can only go off what Marco Rubio said 2 days after the initial strikes. It's because Benjamin Netanyahu has played Donald Trump like a fiddle. He hasn't seen it coming. He's finally got what he wanted after 30 or 40 years in going after the Iranians. And what you've actually done is you've killed a fella who the Gulf states believed was going to die soon anyway.
Yeah.
There could have been potential... You left a deal that, for all intents and purposes, despite us handing over money, was working when their enrichment was at about 3%, rather than the 90% needed to build a nuclear weapon. You've killed an older fella whose now more extremist son is in charge, we're led to believe. And because you've killed his wife and dad is almost certainly going to try and build a nuke and come after us all.
But
So,
also, I mean,
what a mess.
Trump's own position in America is weakened hugely by this, and he's got the midterm elections not far off. He'll have a really bad result as a result of this. The only person in his entourage who comes out of this quite well is, strangely enough, J.D. Vance.
We've not heard much from him,
who's
have we?
been very quiet about
Yes,
this
he
and
has.
always said to be against this military activity.
I think.
And I think he's been proved right, because Trump got himself into a position without knowing why he was doing it. And, you know, he reacts so quickly without thought, and he just says, right, go for them. And they say, well, what are we trying to achieve? And no one knew. And that's not a good way to start a war. And to end it like this for Trump is a disaster.
Yeah. You know
Now, what on earth Netanyahu is now going to do, I'm afraid it's not in even Trump's hands.
No.
He's actually got no cards now, and he's going to look like a weak, beaten president, and it makes the whole of the Western alliance look weak too, I'm afraid.
Netanyahu comes a winner out of this. He's got an election coming up. The majority of Israeli people are behind this war. They obviously live under the threat of both Iran and the Houthis and others in Lebanon. I think the other winner is clearly Vladimir Putin, who's had the oil sanctions lifted upon him, as have Iran. So
And the
the
Chinese
talk of
too
Obama
will be
giving out billions of dollars and whatever. Well, Trump's just done more of that.
And the US have weakened themselves militarily. They've expended an enormous amount of money, resources and weapons, which means that should China attempt anything, invading Taiwan, for example, in the next 18 months, it's doubtful whether the US will be able to...
And by the way, there is another war going on in Europe. It's a place called Ukraine.
Yes.
So goodness only knows what that means there. I mean, this again, it may well be with Trump in 24 hours, he's back saying no.
Indeed, we can't hold this as gospel.
This may not be a permanent peace,
No.
but I'm sure we'll hear him say, these guys, and you know, if they do make one more move, I'm going to come back at them. I don't know, but it does look, quite frankly, a dreadful pronouncement from an extraordinary
I think he looks quite lonely
president.
because allies haven't turned up for him.
Yes.
And you can't be surprised. It's the equivalent of me kicking Andrew in the shin and going, Miriam and Piers, why aren't you helping me? Well, you were calling me all sorts of names last week, threatening to kick our other mate in the shins, Greenland, over there.
Yes.
So why would we be coming helping
I
you?
think Greenland was the shift.
catalyst.
Because indeed, because until Greenland, you saw European leaders like Keir Starmer, like Mark Rutte, trying to appease Trump, pretending they didn't notice the insults, the changes of heart, the changes of mind, just trying to keep him on side, even after that press conference with Zelensky. And, of course, most European leaders are very supportive of Zelensky. But there was something about Greenland that made those European leaders stand up and say, we're not going to agree with him anymore just for the sake of it. And I wonder if that has emboldened people to not support this war.
I think you're quite right. You'll see also this will embolden the Venezuelans that he took over, and the remnants of that regime, who are Maduro's chums, are still around. That will strengthen them, and also the Cuban government, who are currently blockaded and in darkness, where Corbyn chose to visit the week there was no power. I thought that was quite funny. Anyway,
he attracts no power.
He does. Absolutely, it's one thing we can agree on. But it's a really bad moment for Trump. And it's almost an admission, I can't win, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not getting the support I thought I'd get, oh dear, let's stop it.
I saw even the Crown Prince of Iran appeal to Trump to say, please do not take out the energy infrastructure. It belongs to the Iranian people and we need it when the mullahs are out and we rebuild Iran. You need it. So
I mean, the sad thing is that Mossad, who are normally very effective at targeting regime individuals, didn't get the whole of these bunch of the Ayatollahs chums
But it's such an
in one
entrenched
go.
regime, isn't it? You know, they have been running this country, Iran, since 1979. I don't think however many leaders... Of course, Israel will benefit from any chaos, but I don't think you can destroy the regime by taking out the leaders. Of course, there is another interpretation to this, which is, as terrible as things look now, as expensive the war is, as catastrophic the economic crisis that's coming might be, it could be a good thing thing in the long term for the world, for Iran to be rid of so much of its... I mean, its navy's completely destroyed.
Yeah.
Its air force completely destroyed. They've obviously expended an awful lot of their missiles. We don't know how many they have left. It may be the price of safety that we're paying now.
It might be. It might be because the deal may be being done. There was reports over the weekend by the pollster Frank Luntz that the US wanted the Iranian regime, as it currently stands, to make 6 commitments, which was no missile programme for 5 years, 0 uranium enrichment, decommissioning of nuclear reactors, arms control treaties with regional countries, no financing for regional proxies, and strict outside observation protocols around the creation and use of centrifuges, also known before 2017 as the JCPOA.
Yeah.
It's basically the same deal, and I can't help but felt his own ego has gone, we can't have this because it's got Obama's signature on it. He hates Obama to the point where he'll rip it up, cost the American people an absolute fortune, and then go back and do exactly the same thing anyway. And actually, it probably shows the only person which historically Donald Trump listens to is the markets, and he knows they're not shifting.
Well, the question is now, what will Netanyahu do?
Well, I don't think
Until
he'll
we've heard from him, we don't know that this war has ended.
But what does this mean for Britain, though? I mean, if the IRGC are behind this terror attack,
which
Golders Green,
I would put money on,
Israel are suggesting, does that mean we're going to be susceptible to more terror attacks coming from Iran? We know already that they've prevented 22 attacks since 2022.
Yeah, I'm sure we will, because this isn't going to stop overnight.
No.
And also, the current Ayatollah has been injured physically and mentally, has suffered huge personal losses, as well as having his country nearly obliterated. He is not going to sit there quietly.
They want revenge.
These people like revenge. They are a vengeful country, and we've seen that time and time again. I think it makes terrorism acts more likely rather than less likely.
And this takes us back to my earlier point that back in the 90s, when Israel and Netanyahu were raising the alarm about Iran, before the Iranians had managed to get themselves entrenched in so many Western countries, before they'd built up their proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, that would have been an easy time to deal with Iran. But, of course, it was too difficult politically. What Western power then could have done exactly what Trump's doing now? People didn't understand the threat, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you're right. And also, I hope this means that the Cobra meeting this afternoon will focus on defence, so that when the next war comes, we're actually ready to deal with it and protect our bases and our serving officers in the way they should be expected to be protected.
Well, and our people, Piers, because we're going to have refugees, so-called refugees. Some will pretend to be refugees, come out of this. As I said, there's 100,000 in Lebanon. There's going to be people from Iran. Some will end up in Turkey. Some will go to Cyprus. Many will make their way across the Channel at some point, and no doubt end up in some of these splinter cells, whether they be North London or otherwise. And I find it terrifying that any invasion anywhere tends to cause pushback of people wreaking revenge and whatever else. So the Ayatollah or all the way down to the common man in Iran. And the idea of another terrorist attack happening in this country is terrifying.
The security and safety of British citizens is the priority of any Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
And it's about time Starmer stood up to the plate and realised that.
Well, Matthew, I was reading this morning that polling shows that Keir Starmer's personal ratings have improved by 11 points since the start of this war. He's still in the negative, but clearly people think that, on balance, he's handling this well.
I said to someone last week in the Labour Party, I said, don't be surprised if he gets a polling bounce from this, and they laughed at me. I said, no, what you forget is war makes weak leaders look strong.
Absolutely.
And I've seen the briefings come out of Number 10 and people aligned to them saying, you know, would you really want Angela Rayner in charge at the moment? Would she be sat round or West Streeting with NATO allies as if, you know, they're totally incapable?
I mean, that's quite cynical. You could also say he made the right call in not allowing British forces to get involved in this strikes.
I absolutely
that's what
think
most
he
people
did,
think.
and I thought it was a narrow tightrope in going, we'll give him a little bit to try and help him stave off, whether that be the air bases or we'll get people flying over drones to see if we can take out some of the mines in the strait that the Iranian regime has put there. I think he's played it absolutely correct and has got a lot of flack for it, actually.
Well, fascinating. And we will keep you up to date with all that. Let's get our 60-second news update now with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. The 11:30 headlines. 4 ambulances belonging to a Jewish community service have been set on fire in North London in what police are treating as an anti-Semitic hate crime. No injuries have been reported, but explosions were heard as oxygen cylinders ignited. The Prime Minister's called it a deeply shocking attack.
Anti-Semitism has no place in our society, and it's really important that we all stand together at a moment like this.
The pilot and co-pilot of an Air Canada plane have been killed after it crashed into a fire engine on the runway at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Dozens of passengers were on board. 40 are in hospital. The airport has now been shut as investigators work to establish how the collision happened. The clock is ticking after Donald Trump warned the US could obliterate Iran's power plants if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened within 48 hours. In the last few minutes, the president has rolled back on that warning. It came after a call with Keir Starmer, who will chair the emergency Cobra meeting this afternoon on the war's impact on the UK economy. Meanwhile, fighting is intensifying across the region, with Israeli strikes reported in Tehran and missiles intercepted over Israel, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And authorities are braced for a surge in small boat crossings in the Channel as calmer weather sets in. Nearly 600 migrants arrived in just the past 5 days, with more expected.
Take the GB News family with you on any device. As long as you have an internet connection, tune into GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We've still got Matthew Talbot and Piers Pottinger in the studio, of course, reacting to that statement from Donald Trump that he is going to postpone strikes on Iranian power plants.
Yeah.
He says that there are talks underway that are progressing well with the Iranians.
Which is fascinating. But I'd say that's about the power plants, but presumably the war generally continues. We're not sure.
Well, we're not sure. And, of course, the Strait of Hormuz is still
blockaded,
closed to all extents and purposes. Is it, Matthew? Well, let's start with Piers, actually. I think we finished with Matthew last time. We're going to cross now, to Golders Green, where the Metropolitan Police are providing an update on the attack on those Jewish ambulances in the early hours this morning.
Well, that was Donald Trump, actually. But we're going to Golders Green now.
Of the police investigation. At around 1:45 hours today, we were called by the London Fire Brigade to reports of a fire on Highfield Road, Golders Green. We attended the scene where 4 ambulances from Hatzola, a volunteer-led ambulance service run by members of the Jewish community, were on fire. The attack occurred in the car park of a local synagogue where Hatzola's vehicles for this area are based. Explosions were heard as oxygen canisters on board the ambulances exploded. Nearby homes were evacuated as a precaution, with 34 residents displaced and road closures put in place. Thankfully, no injuries were reported and all of the fires were safely put out. 4 ambulances have been destroyed, but we understand the service remains fully operational and able to respond to emergencies. We were able to get local residents back into their homes relatively quickly, and I thank them for their patience and understanding. This arson attack is being treated as an anti-Semitic hate crime. This is a devastating incident for our Jewish communities, and we've launched an immediate investigation to identify those responsible. Our officers remain on scene to carry out urgent inquiries and to gather CCTV footage and other evidence. We believe we're looking for 3 suspects at this early stage. CCTV footage appears to show 3 people in hoods pouring accelerant onto the vehicles before igniting them and fleeing. While this has not been declared a terrorist incident at this stage, the investigation is now being led by Counter-terrorism policing, with all the specialist expertise they bring and all lines of inquiry remain open. We are aware of an online claim from a group taking responsibility for this attack. Establishing the authenticity and accuracy of this claim will be a priority for the investigation team, but it is not something we can confirm at this point. There have been no arrests at this early stage, and we would urge anyone with information to please contact us as soon as possible. You can do so anonymously if you wish. We have already spoken to local community and faith leaders and will continue that work today. A specific policing plan focused on key community locations across the area is underway and will continue beyond the coming days as we move towards Passover in early April. This attack comes at a time when fears are already heightened given global events and recent attacks targeting Jewish communities in other parts of Europe. The Met Police stands shoulder to shoulder with our partners and communities. Together, we take a zero-tolerance approach to hate crime. We are stepping up our support to Jewish communities across London to engage, offer reassurance and take practical action to protect people and property. If you have any information about what happened in Golders Green, please come forward and call the police on 101, providing the reference 415 of the 23rd of March. To remain anonymous, call the independent charity Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to Deputy Assistant Commissioner Paul Askew from the London Fire Brigade.
Of course, yeah. Early this morning, the London Fire Brigade control room took the first of 56 calls reporting a fire on Highfield Road in Golders Green. Upon arrival, crews were met with a well-developed fire involving 4 ambulances. Several cylinders stored within the vehicles exploded because of the heat, causing damage to the windows of a nearby residential block. Residents from the immediate area were evacuated to a rest centre as a precaution while crews worked to bring the incident under control. The fire was safely extinguished overnight. We understand the impact this fire will have on the local community, including our Jewish residents. The Brigade's community engagement team attended the rest centre last night to support residents that have been directly impacted by the fire. Alongside our firefighters, they will continue to work with and support the local community in the coming days. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Well, that was the statement there from Luke Williams, the Detective Chief Superintendent, about this arson attack on Jewish ambulances. He referred there to a claim online by a group taking responsibility that the police have yet to verify. But we should remind everybody that the Telegraph are reporting that the Israelis think that the IRGC, may be responsible for this attack. Well, we're joined still.
Matthew Talbot's still with us, and that's what we were talking about earlier, Matthew, weren't we? The threat, this whatever Trump is or isn't going to do in Iran now, the deed is done. The threat of terror attacks in Britain has escalated.
Yeah, we've seen it before in this country where people will use it as fuel. And in a way, I'm not saying it's right. If someone blew up my mum and dad, I don't know what state of mind I'd be in and who I'd hold responsible. And I can appreciate the state of mind people might be in. What I don't like, and again, we don't know who it is necessarily yet, is people that aren't even adjacent to this sort of stuff deciding it is a reason to take up issue with Jewish people or whoever the group may be at the time that's unpopular. And again, I spoke earlier about my friend. I've texted him just off air to say, I don't know how many more times I can say to you, I hope you're OK without sounding redundant. And he said, I don't think we're going to be here much longer. Like, they're going to go. They're going to... You should not... Whoever you are, you should not feel unsafe in this country. And I think there's several things the Prime Minister should probably look at doing. He needs to prescribe the IRGC as a bare minimum so that anyone showing support for this sort of group is therefore permitting a criminal act and we deal with them. I think the border has to be dealt with because people are going to come in always, and don't get me wrong, I'm not tying everyone with the same brush. There are going to be people that we know that will throw their passports in the channel, pretend to be someone they're not and wish to do us
Some of them are
harm.
opportunists, some of them may be agents of foreign regimes.
Exactly. And this, this again, you said about the 90s, this isn't anything new, but the problem is these people are obviously quite organised after 30 years and can bring people in. There are obviously those, I don't know if there's something to be done about social media when people are quite vulnerable and young and end up going down a different path because of they're groomed into these sort of groups because their mum and dad might not be from this country, they don't really feel part of this country, they see a lot of the stuff going on and then go, OK, maybe I'm going to take up arms for my homeland and start doing stuff. And I think the other big killer, which was warned to Theresa May at the time before the Manchester attack, is community policing is redundant. And those types of officers are some of the most important because they know exactly who these people are in these communities and can prevent potential atrocities from happening somewhere down the line. And the defunding that's happened over many years, by the way, has to be counteracted, and we have to have people with the specialist knowledge knowing who are the people that are... It's the same as you do with county lines. Who are the people on the street corners? Who's grooming them in? How do we take them down? It's the same with people outside places of worship that become extremists and whatever else. We have to get to grips with it, or I fear the worst will happen.
Well, let's talk about the impact of social media then, because certainly after October the 7th, there was a huge rise in young people seeing videos in TikTok that were very anti-Semitic. There was a time when Osama bin Laden was celebrated as a hero on TikTok with millions and millions and millions of views. And yet, the same people who say, well, we just need better education, also say, well, there's nothing we can do to crack down on social media. It doesn't really matter. It's not driving the problem. Well, you either believe that information influences people or you don't. You can't have it both ways.
I think, speaking as someone who was a very disillusioned teenager, and I think you can feel like that if you feel like you've not got what you wanted in life and you can be vulnerable. And a lot of this... It's just a little bit off topic, but you see it with this idea of a manosphere. They can say one thing that makes perfect sense. I don't want to work 9 to 5. I want to be my own boss. I want the money. I want the girls. Totally legitimate. That's the hook. And it's the same way that people may or may not feel comfortable in this country if they're of mixed extraction and there's something not quite right that they feel. And there'll be a hook. Do you feel like this? Do you feel people look at you funny? Well, that's a legitimate concern, again, for an individual who maybe isn't white or is from a different country. That's the hook. They get you in and then they brainwash you that it's all X, Y and Z people's fault, and that's how you turn people into terrorists. What you do about it, I don't know. I remember seeing Barack Obama last year speak about the idea of social media, that how it used to be great. The algorithm in many ways has changed things, and he said, I was hoping he'd have some sort of answer as someone you may look to in times of leadership. Without Chinese levels of state surveillance, it's almost impossible, and that's the problem. Do we really want a state that sees everything we do at all times, and could it be trusted? I don't think I would want that. The problem is, what do you do otherwise then? And you're right, education can go some way, but, you know, we all had similar educations, and some of us go some ways, others don't. You know, it can depend. We've just got to be ultra wary and throw our arms around people that feel vulnerable. I know it's right what Wes said, in fairness. Those of us that aren't Jewish should go out of our way to make sure people feel that they're seen, they're heard. And it's the same when you see it with Muslims as well. These communities have got to be turned away from one another rather than turned in against one another. There's some great people in Manchester that do good community work. We're bringing faiths together, multi-faiths and whatever. That's what you've got to do, and I'm looking towards the elders in that community to do so, I think.
All right, Matthew, that's Matthew Talbot. Thank you so much for that. Plenty more reaction to come up on GB News. We'll be getting the latest reaction on what Donald Trump has said now about war in Iran. May surprise you. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Heavy rain will continue across the Canaries over the next couple of days. Some fine weather across Spain and Portugal. Low pressure still across the Canaries, Madeira as well, seeing the risk of some rain. Sunny spells across Spain and Portugal, feeling pleasant. But low pressure also dominates parts of Italy and Greece. Outbreaks of heavy rain here on the cold side as well for the time of year. The rain across the Canaries will start to ease, particularly towards the end of the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Jubes & Co. with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here. GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection. Tune in to GB News, anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
The late edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, late edition.
Alex Armstrong Tonight, late edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray. Are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it. Don't get this on the BBC. Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines. The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos. What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From cold mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis in the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it? We're here again to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast,
Every morning from 6 a.m.
only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, to recap that breaking news, Donald Trump says the US has had good and productive conversations with Iran, and he will order the military to postpone any military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure. Remember that he said he was going to do that if they did not lift the siege on the Straits of Hormuz.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, joins us now from Golders Green. Mark, good morning. What do you make to Trump's statement released just recently?
Well, I mean, I think as far as Donald Trump is concerned, obviously he had said that the 48 hours is a time scale that the government, the regime in Tehran had to comply with unblocking the Strait of Hormuz. But clearly, from his point of view, and we can only take him at face value, he says that he's made some inroads there, that perhaps there are negotiations that might lead to a de-escalation, as the likes of Keir Starmer and others have been calling for. And at the end of the day, that's only to be hoped for, because we don't want to see an escalation that sees the likes of the power grids taken out, perhaps a tit for tat then on the surrounding Gulf states. But of course today all focus in this country is on what has happened here in Golders Green with that attack that has taken place, that has now been declared not a terrorism incident, but it is being led by Counter-terrorism Command. Police also investigating possible links to the Islamic regime core guards, of course, of Iran, with a group linked to the IRGC claiming responsibility. This is what Detective Chief Superintendent Luke Williams said a short time ago.
While this has not been declared a terrorist incident at this stage, the investigation is now being led by counter-terrorism policing, with all the specialist expertise they bring, and all lines of inquiry remain open.
and the Detective Chief Superintendent said that 3 men were spotted on CCTV pouring accelerant on these ambulances before setting them ablaze. Those 3 men are still at large at the moment, but a manhunt is underway to try and identify them and bring them into custody.
OK, Mark White, thank you so much. That's our Home and Security Head, to Mark White, who will be, I'm sure, in Golders Green throughout the day, keeping abreast of that major story. It does sound more and more, doesn't it, like a terror attack?
It does. Well, let's see what they come up with, but certainly all part of this ongoing conflict in the Middle East that's spreading to all corners of the globe.
Certainly is. And then we've got Donald Trump intervening to saying he's lifting the threat of blowing, what was he going to blow to smithereens or something, he said? Iran's energy plants.
Infrastructure.
That threat's been lifted, but the siege of the Straits of Hormuz has not.
Continues. Well, we'll be back tomorrow with who knows what's going to happen next. Join us again tomorrow on Britain's Newsroom.
See you tomorrow. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain, Tom and Dawn.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. A bit of a north-south split with the weather today. After a chilly start, we'll see cloud and rain pushing in across the north as we move through. Into the afternoon, outbreaks of heavy rain developing. But this morning, some fog and frost. First thing, a chilly start, increasing amounts of cloud across the north of the UK as we move through the day. Outbreaks of rain for Northern Ireland and Scotland. Into the afternoon, the rain turning heavy across northern Scotland. Some snow over the mountains here. Best of the sunshine holding on across parts of England and Wales, particularly the southeast, where temperatures will reach around 15 or 16 degrees, with light winds feeling fairly pleasant. Outbreaks of rain pushing eastwards across the north of the UK into the evening time. The rain heavy at times, particularly over the high ground, a little bit of mountain snow. The wind's picking up this evening as well. Gales around the coast, quite blustery and a cold feel. Cloudy skies across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England. Some drizzle in the wind, and then largely cloudy skies for Wales too. Some clear spells